Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this special meeting of the Strong Community Select Committee, which is looking at the toilet strategy for Monmouthshire. And as we know, this is no laughing matter. This is a very serious thing that we'll be discussing today. So I think it's best if we introduce ourselves first of all. I'm Jane Pratt and I chair this meeting, and I'm also the member for Llanelli Hill, Gilwan and Clydach.
Nicola Perry, Democratic Services.
Dave Jones, Head of Public Protection.
Anne Webb, a member of this committee and represents Narvans and Tintern for Monmouthshire. Thank you.
Good morning, Richard Roden, member for Dixon Royal-Plaston, a member of this committee.
County Councillor Lisa Dimmock for ND and member of committee.
County Councillor Tony Eason, Dewstor Ward Caldecott, member of this committee.
Thank you very much. And can I just check that the members have all the relevant documents? Has the report from last week's visits gone to all members?
Yeah, I've emailed all members this morning.
Yeah, so you should have received this morning the report that was put together following the visit we made last week, when Councillor Webb, Councillor Smith and myself and Jan Baldwin, who manages all of the cleaning of the toilets, we spent a day out visiting 19 facilities in the area. So what we've got to do today is to consider and comment on the draft local toilet strategy, and that we obviously hear about the findings of the member site visits on the 7th of February and discuss those as well. So I'm going to hand over now to our officer so that he can run us through the strategy. Thank you very much, Dave.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What I'll do is I'll touch upon the covering report, but I won't dwell on that because it's all in the main report. A couple of members commented to me before Christmas as to, do we need a strategy? We have looked at this 10 years ago, 2009, a lot of work done. That is in the strategy.
Sorry, Dave, to interrupt.
Sorry.
Can I just, first of all, I forgot to do apologies.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Can we just confirm apologies for absence, please?
Yes, apologies from County Councillor Val Smith.
Thank you very much. Sorry about that.
No problem. Like I say, I won't dwell on the covering report. We'll come back to the recommendations, obviously, after the discussion. In terms of why is it here now, it's because the legal requirements under the Public Health Wales Act 2017 has brought in a provision to ensure that we prepare and publish a local toilet strategy by the end of May. So that's the reason it's here today. There will be a process behind it, and obviously the comments I'll be making is how we got to where we are, what was the methodology behind putting together what it is. The survey's been mentioned that Jan and members went to last week, and that obviously will inform that strategy moving forward. So that's all the covering report really says, is that's the legal requirement of it. In terms of the key actions, I think probably best, Chair, if I cover that as we go through the report proper. So in terms of the draft local toilet strategy, the one in front of you dated February 2019, if I go through that, like I say, I won't go through it bit by bit, otherwise we're here till 2 o'clock this afternoon. But in terms of the summary, basically, I think we're all aware, as the Chair said in the opening address, they are essential to access to public outdoor spaces. They do allow for the space to become a destination for extended periods of socialising. You know, what makes an appealing town centre? For many, it will be obviously access to clean and hygienic toilet facilities. And actually, if you don't have that, might actually put people off getting there. Businesses, similarly, would be keen to make sure those town centres particularly are as attractive as possible. Being a large tourism area, clearly we will have issues obviously with hikers, etc. as well. So there's a whole range of reasons as to why they are important. This council, probably different to many others in the fact that the town and the community councils, through that work done 10 years ago now, do actually own and manage a large number of our facilities across the county, which obviously the strategy will refer to. That's 1.3. That talks about what was the issue that work was done in 2009, and those findings were reported to Cabinet in the summer of 2010. And that was the facility, if you like, in terms of making sure that town and community councils either took them over completely in terms of the asset transfer, or they contributed to the cleaning, or they obviously took on the management of those facilities. The thing I would stress, I think, is not just about public toilet blocks. I think we tend to think about, we can all picture that toilet block, be it Jubilee Way, be it the bus station, Abergavenny. It is about the whole range of publicly accessible toilets. So that includes everything in our leisure centres, museums, etc., and also the private sector. So for Abergavenny, for example, which we'll pick up as we go along, a lot of people will use that facility in Morrison's. They will use the facility in Witherspoons because they are manned, and those providers are quite happy for that to occur. So it's not just about our traditional public toilet blocks. 1.5, there is comment from Gwent Police, and we'll pick that up as we go through. One of the things that has come through is better information on opening times and locations. Something the Welsh Government is keen on is to make sure that's mapped out, which again we'll pick up as we go through, to make sure people are out and about in the areas. They can access information to say where are things, how long are they open for, etc. And then they can make decisions as to where they may want to go. As 1.7 says, it is also about the private sector, and many facilities are quite happy for those facilities to be used by members of the public that aren't necessarily paying customers. Event organisers, I do chair the event safety group within Monmouthshire. We do spend a lot of time and effort to make sure that those larger events, for example, Abergavenny Food Festival, have adequate facilities to make sure that that visiting experience is one that you would like to treasure for future reference and return to the area. 1.9 is about the fact that we have now got a one-off Welsh Government grant, £17,200. The reason they gave that, and I quote them, is impartial recompense for the additional work required to develop and publish the local toilet strategies. So that's one of the actions going forward, is what do we do with that one-off payment that came in only about 2-3 weeks ago. We will get that, just to confirm, because we have sent in the required information in terms of the unique property reference numbers for where the toilet blocks are, etc. So that's a little bit of good news. 1.10, I won't go through that, because we pick that up as we go through in terms of what those actions will be going forward. The introduction, as the chair says, actually is a typo there. It's not 20 dedicated public toilets. That is 19. There's 9 remain owned by Monmouthshire Council, 10 are owned now by town and community councils. But of the 9 that stay with us, the Abergavenny ones are part run and managed by the town council. So it's quite a different picture, as I say, to many of local authorities. So the introduction just sort of picks up why we're doing it, the importance of public provision. We mentioned tourism, but also in 2.2 it does refer to those certain groups in society, including older people, those with disabilities and parents, carers with young children, would obviously have more demand, shall we say, on that level of service in our towns and villages. In terms of the outcomes, so this has been guided by the Welsh Government guidance. It is about providing direction for the future as to how we go with public toilet provision. What about maintenance and cleaning of public toilets? And obviously the survey last week will touch on that. And to ensure that those standards are clean, etc. And Jan's with us in terms of the standard of cleaning, etc. Ensuring the community and cleaning visitors has good information to that availability and location. So there's a piece of work the Welsh Government harness all that information from the 22 authorities and make sure it's in a central location, so it'll be readily accessible through a website and through an app in time, but we're not quite there yet. In terms of direction then, in terms of where we should focus that attention and encouraging other organisations to provide public toilet facilities. So we haven't lost hope with the private sector in terms of cafes on the high street. Probably depends a lot on whether the Welsh Government resurrect any funding for that, but clearly we're well placed in terms of encouraging the private sector to pay their part as well. And ultimately, we do need to provide an action plan as to what we do in terms of public toilets. The need for the strategy, that I won't go through that, Chair. It's, as I say, it is a duty on each local authority to produce the strategy. We've got to assess the need. We've done a survey, which we'll talk about shortly. How do we plan to meet those needs? We need to produce a local toilet strategy, and we need to review that strategy and update and publicise revisions. So that is a statutory requirement through the Welsh Government guidance. We need to prepare and publish it by the 31st of May. Just because of the timetabling, we're looking at the 5th of June, purely to make sure we go through a full public consultation before we get to that stage. I've checked with Welsh Government, they're okay with that, and our Head of Legal Services. We think 5 days would be a bit pedantic if someone picked us up on being slightly late in terms of the adoption of the policy. We can certainly prepare and publish it, but it wouldn't be adopted until the 5th. Well-being of future generations, as we know, critically important, and we do obviously have regard to those 5 ways of working which are listed in 3.3. The aims of the strategy, I think that sort of repeats itself really. It's about identifying that provision, analysing the findings we found from the public questionnaire. We also have the benefits of Abergavenny Town Council's own survey that was conducted last summer. So we make reference to that. Plus, obviously, the public consultation process will give people another route through to comment accordingly on the content. Surveys being conducted. So in terms of what's there listed in 4.1, we have done that in terms of the awareness, like I say, will be coming through with the mapping exercise. Reviewing the strategy is a requirement, so at a minimum, and I think we'll be doing it before that certainly, the minimum requirements would be to review that by May 2021. Sounds like a bit of a space age, doesn't it? People floating around on space craft, but that's only obviously 2 years off. But I'm sure we'll probably want to review it before then. 6 is just the methodology as to how it's developed. So again, I don't think we need to go through that. But just to make the point really under 6.1, very much a team effort. I mean, I've just sort of been the conductor, if you like, in terms of pulling the threads together. But colleagues here from operations, Roger and others, Jam particularly, tourism, leisure and culture, put all the information together in terms of the museum, leisure centre provision, etc. Policy and partnerships, Reed Cook was particularly involved in terms of getting the survey together, analysing those results. GIS mapping, that's been quite a task in terms of getting all that information off with the unique property reference number, back to Welsh Government, get it translated, etc. to obviously get the one-off grant from Welsh Government. So it certainly has been a bit of effort in terms of getting to this point in time. The national retailers, so I mentioned like some Morrisons, other supermarkets are available. They were contacted once rather than all of us tootling off to every supermarket. Their comment was very much, we're happy for non-paying customers to use our facilities, but we don't particularly want to publicise that overly because we don't want, I'll touch upon the logo, we don't want the logo in our, we've got corporate imaging to think about. Tesco's is that sort of red imaging, Morrison's yellow and green, etc. They don't particularly want a toilet sticker as the first things you see on the way in. So you can understand it from the retailer's perspective, but certainly those that were contacted were happy informally to have that arrangement. The public consultation went from 19th of December to the 11th of January, and we engaged through press releases, through contacting those town and community councils, through our Twitter and Facebook feeds, and through those access for all forums as listed, and also paper questionnaires when requested. So I did supply a load to Abergavenny 50 Plus group. So basically that's how we sort of conducted that. The survey result was quite low, but we've also got Abergavenny Town Council. It's very similar messages coming back, as you'd imagine, in terms of what we find, and the findings are later in the report. So that's sort of section 6 covers the methodology of how we went about the task. 7 then is how do we link to other priorities, be they national or public service board, etc. The Older People's Commissioner just sort of endorsed that view really, that if you were to close down public toilets en masse, that's very short-sighted. The money that's saved by councils in the short term could have paid for later in health costs as people become detracted from going out and about. So it can be a very short-term measure in terms of closing facilities down. More recently, that Older People's Commissioner for Wales has commented on the consultation to say that these strategies must be supported by funding in order to turn words into action. So I think that's quite pertinent, and I think we'll probably hear from members in terms of the structure of some of our facilities. In terms of wellbeing assessments, that gives a bit of an idea in terms of demographics. Obviously, going forward, people will be getting older in terms of survival rates. So in terms of that assessment, in 20 years' time, it's not that far off, the over 65s will increase by 61%. The over 85s significantly will double in number within Monmouthshire. So I think, again, that's obviously something that we need to consider. The local development plan, should perhaps put planning in the list as well. Their comment is that you couldn't request for public toilets to go in on the back of community infrastructure levy. I'm sure members will be more familiar than with planning, particularly on the committee, because it would be difficult to see how that financial contribution towards public toilets would reasonably relate to that specific housing scheme being delivered. And that would be defensible at appeal. So that's the comment back from planning. They should not, planning obligations, i.e. that 106 monies, should not be used to provide a facility that should be provided by the council or any other public body in a more general sense. So we can't, if you've got 300 houses turning up, you can't then stick in a toilet block and get them to pay for it ultimately. The corporate business plan, obviously we've got a forward-looking plan. I commented there, even though it doesn't obviously specifically refer to public toilets, I mean, you can't cover everything clearly. I think it is implicit on the council that they would consider those future pressures of ageing populations and the future generations aspects. We need to ensure these facilities do remain fit for purpose as we develop as a county. Keeping populations healthy using open spaces is supported by suitable public toilet provision. So in terms of Section 8, that sort of lists what we've got. This is the current position. I thought it was helpful, and I did this with finance colleagues. Table 1 picks up the costs, and we can see obviously the fact that town councils are contributing. Abergavenny, for example, has dropped the costs obviously to the authority. So Roger would have been particularly involved with that in terms of the budget mandates that members will be familiar with. They've been running for a number of years in terms of how do we keep our costs down in terms of that provision. So ultimately, if you look at all that, that shows you the running costs, maintenance, cleaning, etc., broken down. It compares back to, look back at 9-10 year, because that's when the initial review was undertaken. You'll see that obviously our costs as a county council reduced, and the town council thankfully have picked up a lot of those costs in terms of what's provided now. So in terms of Table 1, the first 9 are still owned by ourselves, the Abergavenny toilet blocks, Caldecott Country Park, the cattle market site in Monmouth, Maryport Street, the 2 in Usk are still owned by ourselves. The double line then, horizontal line, are then town and community council owned facilities, Cowent, Jubilee Way, etc. as listed. So we've got 3 in Chepstow, Gilwyn, etc. And you'll see a lot of those are supported with a £1,200 grant from the authority, just help towards those running costs. So the gaps within those boxes, if it's run obviously now by the town and community council, we don't know what their cleaning costs are because they're not conducted by us necessarily. So that's basically 8.2 summarises that to say that it did cost us over £300,000 10 years ago. That's now just under 120,000, and that's a drop of 61%. I make the point there that doesn't then correlate with a drop in the number of public toilets provided. So that's the credit of town and community council that picked up that issue readily in the towns and villages. So 8.3 touches on the ones that were closed, be it Bulwark, Linden Vista, Abergavenny, etc., since that initial review. 8.4 then just sort of talks through, just clarifies what I just said really in terms of who owns what. So I don't need to repeat that. Like I say, it's not just about the traditional toilet blocks, it's about where you've got public access. So lines 20 to 35 in Appendix 1 to this strategy. That covers all the leisure centres, the museums, etc., where people can access those facilities. The other ones then, maybe I should perhaps refer to the appendix, are other public accessible toilets. There's 3 of those. Llanfoes, the Friends of Llanfoes Chapel do provide a facility there. Bridges Centre has a changing place, and that's a facility for disabled people. So we'll have facilities for changing adults in a hygienic way. And Mitchell Troy obviously is the suture facility on the A40. So those are 38 in total that we can readily access, which doesn't include those ones with informal arrangements in the private sector. So that's sort of covered in there. So 8.5 picks up this issue about the hugely positive contribution that town and community councils have picked up since this was initially raised. The harsh reality, noting the financial pressures on the county councils, both 10 years ago and ever since, that the majority of our public toilets would have been closed had it not for the town and community councils not stepping in and taking over responsibility for those. 8.6, we're trying to think a bit differently. An innovative solution was Usk Islands, where the contract for that hot food vendor, part of the responsibility with that was to manage those toilet facilities in conjunction with the hot food outlets. So that's proved successful in terms of ensuring that facility remains open. Events I mentioned earlier, certainly 8.7 refers to that. We will obviously work with those organisers to ensure they've got adequate facilities, be it music festivals, be it agricultural shows. Abergavenny Fine Food Festival, Jan tells me that we do keep the facilities open longer for that increased footfall that occurs during the food festival. So, I think that just shows a flexibility by the authority to blend that access in terms of what's there. Provision in the private sector, so I've touched upon that a couple of times. There used to be a Welsh Government grant of 17,500 as an annual grant. That's disappeared, so hence, subsequently, we're only aware of 2 premises that took up that offer. Obviously, if that was resurrected, and that's something that perhaps will come through, then obviously we would go back and market that again. But currently, there is no Welsh Government finance coming through to the authority to support that. And that 9.2 says that if there is an appetite to revisit that, then certainly we'll play a part. I think the other thing that we can do, also we've got environmental health and licensing officers out regularly within pubs, clubs, retail premises. I think through this mechanism we can certainly promote a voluntary scheme. Would they be willing to have members of the public use their facilities as we're out and about visiting them anyway? National retailers I've referred to, and like I say, they're happy to generally accept that non-paying customers are turning up, but they don't particularly want to have a national logo displayed at entrances. 9.5 talks about those successful events throughout the county. I mentioned the food festival, but a number of sporting events, music festivals, agricultural shows, etc. throughout. And then we do provide consistent advice based on guidance for large events as to what that provision should be it numbers, types of facilities, access, and general suitability. Mapping is an element that came through from Welsh Government, so that's different to before. It is a requirement to map out every one of those publicly available toilets throughout the county. So we've now done that, even though it's in the future tense, because Welsh Government are currently harnessing all that information from the 22. That will be promoted through their Llair, I think is the proper pronunciation, Llair portal. That's an open data service across Wales. So I'll pick up all the information from the 22, plus the national parks, obviously. So 25, I think, with those included, to make sure that everyone knows exactly where things are. It's got a unique property reference number, so when the day cometh, you can press it on your app, and hey presto, you'll be told you're 16 miles from a toilet, perhaps, if you're top of the hill, perhaps. But that's the theory behind it. The data sets it's been done bilingually, and I did speak to them last week, and that they're happy with the information we've submitted thus far. 11 is the findings, so that I does check that on that link, that does take you to the specific findings of the survey that we conducted. As I said earlier, a low response rate, perhaps the timing wasn't great. I think people are probably enjoying Christmas, etc. But the themes coming out from that were very similar to the Town Council survey, and that was a 355 response rate. So we sort of captured 500 views, if you like, from members of the public. Just quickly on terms of the findings, it's quite Abergavenny heavy. I don't know why that was, but they seem to be more willing to comment than others, particularly in the south. And table 2 sort of summarises some of the issues in terms of whether they thought that was a statement that they would agree with or not. Too few facilities, for example. So what I've done in 11.1.4 is to just summarise that in terms of the pertinent points. 80% thought there were too few facilities. I think you'd probably expect that. 52% said the locations weren't necessarily convenient. 41% not feeling safe, but 50% said they were safe. So that's a bit of a half and half job. 69% wanted more information on location, and I think we're working on that as we speak. 31% said the lack of adequate facilities. However, 51% said they were satisfied, so sort of swings in terms of a favourable response. Split really in terms of the opening times, whether they thought they're open at the times they needed or not. Seemed a fairly even split. Cleanliness, similarly, 46% reported they were satisfied with that level of cleanliness. 49% believe toilets should be free to use. You think through this, perhaps you'd think about whether a paid facility would be a better way of making sure the provision carries on for the future. Only 8% disagreed with that statement. And interestingly, that thing about using private toilets, they weren't particularly comfortable with that option if they weren't a paying customer. So that was quite a strong response as well. And then there's a few pertinent points they made through our survey in terms of baby changing facilities. Half thought they were inadequate of those that responded. Disability provision came through as well, and I know that the survey last week will raise that as well. When asked about good facilities, Brewery Yards came forward as got some praise, and the private sector typically in terms of we shop and this is where we go. The poor facilities seem to highlight Whitehorse Lane, Abergavenny came in for the most criticism. Interestingly, a lot of people didn't think there were any toilets in Bailey Park, so I think there's a bit of an issue in terms of saying yes they are. I believe they're open on a weekend. 64% said they'd like to see a sticker or poster to show where the public facilities are, and we can do that. So that is the nationally approved logo that's come from Welsh Government. So there it is for future reference. So that will help obviously identify exactly where they are. Obviously not ideal in public toilet blocks because they don't tend to have windows for obvious reasons. But we'll work around that. So certainly help perhaps for leisure centres where you don't have to necessarily go swimming to use the toilet facility. So those have come through. So they do like to see that, and they say they will use an app as and when that's available. The most frequent comments, as we'd expect, 11.1.6, is cleanliness, lack of information on opening hours. Ideally, there is investment to improve those existing public blocks. Not enough changing areas for babies, and more toilets be desirable. Would be to condense all that down to a few bullet points. That's generally the thought. 40% suggested private providers should encourage non-customers for the toilets. So that's something we can obviously encourage, as I explained earlier. We'll come back to 11.2 because that's where I'm going to populate it with the member comments. But if I just get to the end, Chair, if that's okay. Yeah. The Town Council results are 11.3. Similar, so a lot more responses, and obviously very specific to Abergavenny, but perhaps obviously interest to this survey because 4 of the blocks are there, 5 if you include Bailey Park. And similarly, similar findings really that seemed okay in terms of the bus station in Castle Street would judge the better of the blocks, Whitehorse Lane the worst. Overall, 50% considered the Abergavenny toilets well presented, generally clean, although basic, which I think you'd probably expect in a toilet block. Regarding potential improvements, 31% thought ATC should increase the precincts to fund improvements. 18 thought that perhaps close one block to invest the money saved to improve remaining. And not many suggested charging. So that's something to find. I won't go through them one by one. I think 11.35 may be of relevance, though, where Town Council did go out last summer, I believe with Jan last August. Came back to the comment. Cleaners have an unenviable task. Graffiti and mess has to be removed from surfaces. Needles retrieved from the floor, basins, toilets and bins, and all sorts of strewn around detritus cleared up. So I think our cleaning staff certainly have a difficult job, and they do their very best to make sure that's a clean facility. They have got 3 recommendations. Obviously, they'll work through with the County Council in readiness for April. So their proposals are either to retain the status quo, close one block potentially, and obviously this is all pending current conversations with the Town Council, or the third option is potentially to introduce a small charge to cover usage. So that's really covers the Town Council survey, which is interesting, but similar to the one we conducted. Gwent Police comments, I think we tend to think, let's get more in and they're great, and that's I'm open 24/7 because that's great for access. Gwent Police, conversely, would say don't open them too long because you've got drug taking going on. So we did think it was important to get views from the police, which they have come forward with. I think many of you met Chris Butt already, who's the crime disorder officer now for this area. They do report antisocial behaviour, notably drug taking, and they have reported instances both in Abergavenny and Monmouth recently, before Christmas. They have made representation to those town councils for those blocks that are owned and managed by them to request those closures earlier, including disabled facilities by early evening. 5 o'clock was suggested to prevent anyone seeking to sell or take drugs from public conveniences. So that's their first observation. They have made 2 prosecutions. You say, are they just sort of making it up? Well, they wouldn't, obviously. It's a reliable source. But they do report on 2 prosecutions before Christmas for possession of Class A drugs in Abergavenny. And that is related to obviously being dry in a public toilet area. The cleaning crews through Jan will start now recording those syringes collected and other drug paraphernalia to establish the extent of the problem. And I know Jan is in constant dialogue with those local police, community support officers to obviously tackle things as and when they occur. So that's something hopefully we'll gather the evidence base to support that issue. Solutions will be, and Jan and I did attend a recent problem-solving group specifically looking at Abergavenny as to what perhaps we can do to support the police in their difficult job in trying to tackle this. And some of the things, maybe blue light public toilets, whereby you can't actually see your veins as under that light settings. So that's something to consider. It's not the role of the strategy, obviously, to come through with all the answers now. It's just to say these are the things we're going to be working through going forward. The health and safety considerations can't be ignored, clearly, in both the police attending those sites and particularly Jan's teams out and about cleaning those toilets where we have got sharps randomly scattered, unfortunately. So the police will obviously wish to be included in those conversations about future provision, and we'd obviously endorse and support any views they would have in conjunction with town council providers. So that's the Gwent Police observations. I mentioned the public consultation, so that will be another opportunity to comment on both this strategy and the actions. So if I conclude on the action points under section 12, primarily, clearly, we're going to continue to work closely with those town and community councils on the options for maintaining and improving public toilet provision in the county, noting obviously their key role in provision. We will work on how to best utilise that one-off payment of £17,200. It will be coming through imminently. No doubt we'll have to roll that obviously into 19-20 year, because it'd be a shame just to rush it and spend it in the next 4 or 5 weeks. Work with the private sector to seek to provide more publicly available toilets where most needed. We will display the new nationally approved logo in all those participating toilet facilities, including leisure centres, etc. We will improve awareness and information as to where these toilets are provided through our own website and the clear open access data held by Welsh Government. Clearly, we all obviously have regard to what Welsh Government come back. You assume they come out with some conclusions as to what they found if we contacted 25 authorities across Wales as to what those best practice, etc. is across Wales, so hopefully we can learn from colleagues as well across Wales. Clearly, cleaning and maintenance is bound to come through, obviously, and we will review how do we best monitor and manage that with other providers. Environmental health officers will inspect those privately provided toilets as a part of their inspection regime. It does impact on the star rating scheme, just so you know. So if you're in a restaurant and you think the toilets provided for the public aren't great, let us know when we respond to any of those complaints. We'll continue to work closely with Gwent Police, so I just referred to their comments, to find solutions to reduce that antisocial behaviour that we've currently got in some of our provision. Provide proactive advice to all event organisers in the county to provide suitable provision when we have large events, and respond to those Welsh Government recommendations, which we're sure will be forthcoming through this year as they put together their comments. And I presume Welsh Governments, and perhaps something for this committee to consider, Chair, is if there was a Welsh Government grant for private provision 10 years ago, is there any opportunity to perhaps revisit that in terms of private provision, but also, as per the Older People's Commissioner, great if you've got a strategy that's backed up with some funding. So I think probably there's two key things to go back to Welsh Government with. So that's whistle-stop tour through it. I'm sorry to take a bit of time on it, but quite a lot of detail. I thank colleagues for their contributions. Certainly just all I did was conduct, get it all together, pull the threads together. Happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Dave, for an excellent report, very comprehensive, and there are so many things that the members need to think about today. If it's all right with everybody, I thought we'd now move on to have a report about the visits. Then I'll read out the letter from the disabled community, and then we'll be open it up to members' questions. Pleased to see Mr. Roger Hoggins is with us today, for those watching online, who's Head of Operations. So if I could ask Anne to, and then if Jan could come in afterwards to give a report on the visits made by councillors last week.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, it was very interesting. We really appreciated getting out in the sticks and looking around at toilets, and thank you very much indeed, Jan, for coming with us. With the, you say that there's going to be an app for toilets, David. Just a couple of points, Chairman. They're going to be post-coded, are they? So as well, yeah. Thank you.
It's a bit of an onerous task, but what
Yes.
we did is I provided all the postcodes with Roger and Jan back to GIS team, which are part of the SRS service. So then they provide a unique property reference number. So that's what's mapped out. It gives a northing and a southeasting, whatever. And they then map it specifically as to where it is. So when you're out with a map, it should be able to tell you exactly where
Great.
your
Okay, thank
nearest
you.
facility is.
There's other stores available as well as Tesco's and Morrison's. Waitrose provide public toilets as well. If it's in the airport, it's important that we have all the stores represented. Sorry, there's just one thing. Just another thing, the barrier at Usk toilets. This is just things that we're thinking of. I know this one was other survey, but it was suggested, wasn't it, Jan, that it's been because of the problems there. The 17,200. I hope it's going to be ring-fenced, because although it's not a lot of money, it would go a long way in what we saw the other day. It would really go quite a long way. I really do hope that's ring-fenced and doesn't get, caught up with other financial matters. Thank you very much. Do you want me to go through every single toilet, really, Chairman, or?
I think if you could just,
How should we just do it?
pick out the
Goitra,
salient.
Yeah, we just quickly go through. Goitra, you can see there the problems. It wasn't the cleaning that was fine. It was just the outside of the buildings, the leaves and the decoration, the doors and things like this. There were a lot of leaves and twigs and things outside, which just need a good sweep. And I know it's not part of Jan's responsibilities, but we do need to keep them clean and tidy outside. I think we agreed that, didn't we, Chairman? Yeah. Gilwern, there again. I mean, that 17,200 would go a long way in painting doors and just making, painting and
I just say on that point, Councillor
Yes.
Webb, that Gilwern are a community council who do have the funding to actually complete those improvements.
Right.
And I think that, what's very apparent in that particular case is that although Gilwern have taken over the running of that toilet, it isn't being done up to an adequate standard. So I think we need to follow that up separately.
Yeah, okay. There's electric wires in Castle Street were a concern to us, and I hope that these little issues, will they be dealt with fairly quickly, Dave or Roger? I don't know who answers this, but they were bare wires, electric wires, whatever. Probably that was in Castle Street.
Have you got a copy of the report?
Moving on to Market Street.
I think the wires were cast. They
They're
were
probably.
the telephone wires that were connected to what was a disabled alarm.
Well, it just needs cutting off then.
It needs sorted out. And
Just-
it needs taken
But
off
I
the
just hope that
building.
Dave has got that.
Well, on the
No,
It's
for
just
our
another thing-
properties, I think, yeah, I mean, the chair makes a good point, isn't it? If it's Gilburn, it's not ours, so
It's
it'll
Castle
be...
Street.
Sorry, back to the Gilburn one, isn't it? In terms of that's issue, that's for the Town and Community Council that actually own the facility.
Yeah.
Certainly ours, so the 1 to 9 on the list within the strategy, clear ours. So if there's a property deficit, I assume we refer them through to property, Rog. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that what needs to happen, which was clear from our visits, is that property need to get out there and do an audit of these toilets and have a look to see, you know, what needs attention, because there was some serious concerns, weren't there, Councillor Webb? And it's quite clear to us that property haven't been out there inspecting these toilets.
Yeah, thank you very much. Castle Street, we've done that one. Market Street Brewery Yard, that was okay. But the water pressure, I think officers have trouble with the water pressure there for some time, and it was really, there's nothing there. It was really, really no water. So can that possibly be dealt with, Dave?
We met on site with property services colleagues to see what can be
It's a problem, yeah.
So it has been passed on to those who might be in a position to be able to deal with it.
There's nothing that we can do with rainwater, is there, and use the rainwater? I mean, that's a silly idea. It's completely off the, you know. Oh, did it?
Using rainwater, we then have to have a collection system, and where you site it. Given the nature of the building, you probably have to site it. Probably on a tank somewhere alongside it, transfer it into a tank and dump it in the tank.
Yeah.
Typically, rainwater is used for flushing, not necessarily the taps and washing.
Oh, yeah. Right, thank you. Moving on to White Horse Lane, not a wonderful, we weren't particularly proud of that toilet, were we, Jane? You can see the comments there. There was a hanging guy from Babylon in there.
Yes, and to add to that, I think the actual condition of the building, the roof in particular, was of great concern. And I think, you know, we did feel on the day that really those toilets, we'd agree with Abergavenny Town Council that really they should be closed. They're not fit for purpose.
No. Mitchell Troy, we were surprised. We thought that the condition was better than we'd imagined. Sorry, I beg your pardon, sorry. The ones along the dual carriageway, the Mitchell Troy, the trunk road ones, which are... Yes?
You will no doubt recall the history to the Abergavenny arrangement, whereby a decision was taken by the authority that in the event of no funding coming from Abergavenny, they would close all of them except for one. But funding did come forward from Abergavenny, but we have been encouraging Abergavenny Town Council to take them on. Thereafter, to see the draft agreement, which I've got available to send to them. They are waiting on me providing them with more information about that. And interestingly, you know, I understand that the view from Abergavenny Town Council is that they would wish to see White Horse Lane closed. When previously debated, some years ago, I'd have to say, they wanted to keep it open. So, but times change, things move on, and we will be looking to work with them now to see whether or not that transfer can be organised.
Yeah, and I think we felt on the day that, and also looking at the police comments about that particular location, it's quite, threatening at night, and it's obviously being used for antisocial behaviour and drug dealing, which adds to it, really, doesn't it?
Moving on to the Mitchell Troy ones, on the dual carriageway there, we thought that the condition there was better than we'd imagined, but there was problems with a seat, which I think has been reported. The bus station, one's in Abergavenny. As you can see there's a lot of concerns about that. particularly with other issues with regard to that hydroelectric charging facility in the centre. I don't know if any other members have seen that in the middle of the car park. We were very concerned about that. It's very ugly. And it's just placed in the middle of the car park in Abergavenny. We didn't know about this. Had we not visited Abergavenny, we'd have been quite unaware of this. It's evidently a futuristic idea of hydrogen electric charging. But it's very, very ugly in a tourist town. But we need to look at that at some other stage, I think, and probably not this.
Do you want to comment on that, Roger?
Yeah, if I may, Madam Chairman, the authority agreed to allow River Simple to place a hydrogen refuelling station in the car park. We took the opportunity to put electric charging points there at the same time. The River Simple have been back asking about what we can do to improve the facade, and we've been in touch with a I'll call it graffiti artist, which is probably, well, actually it is the right term nowadays, who is looking at working with the schools to put to actually paint those walls and put on there various scenes developed by school children to improve the look of it. So that there is work underway to address that at the moment.
Could we make Banksy aware of the problem, please? That might be very useful. Oh dear, I've lost it. Hold on a minute. Right. Then we've got,
Whilst you're on that toilet, Councillor Webb, I think the other thing that we were very concerned about is that this is the main place where visitors on coaches and buses come to the town. It's a very sad area where you've got the closed down tourist information centre, this really ugly hydrogen which doesn't look as if anybody's using it. And also I've had reports from residents that use buses on a regular basis that cars park in the electric charging points that aren't using it for the purpose that's intended, so that, they're just used as additional spaces anyway.
and just one other point, just to note that I have inquired about those 3 big commercial waste bins at the side of the toilet, which are ugly, and I have asked an officer to look into that and see if they can be taken away. You know what I'm talking about, Jan? Thank you. Then the Riverside toilets in Chepstow. Moving on to Chepstow, you'll see the comments there. But basically, they weren't too bad, were they? The outside was okay, right. Castle Dell. Yeah, we were concerned about the condition of those, but those are the ones run by the Chepstow Town Council, yes. Yeah.
I mean, clearly the rodents, we did see evidence of, rodents being in there.
Welsh Street, there again we had a bit of hanging gardens there. But the blue light is installed. I think we need to talk again about, Dave, about the blue lights, whether these are actually really working. I think there's different views on this, whether it's worth actually considering putting them in more toilets. There are other views about that, I think. Perhaps, anyway, that's for another occasion. Jubilee toilets in Caldecott. Yeah. Castle Street Country Park. Yeah, that's right. We were concerned about the burns there, weren't we, Jan? Obviously, problem there with drugs taking and needles and also the electric charging points, which is going for another agenda, I think, Tony. But we were concerned about that, weren't we, Chairman? Usk Island. We were talking about the barrier being moved out. Graffiti. The car park then it really looks sad. A lot of last year's leaves and just needs a good old sweep and a good tidy up there. But that's, I imagine is that part of your responsibility, Roger, or?
Was that Usk Island?
Yes. But just run in there.
Well,
Thank you very much. Thank you. Usk, Mary Port Street, that was not too bad at all. But there were a few bits and bobs there that need really sorting out. Agincourt Street, Monmouth. Yeah, the steps and the baby changing facility is was on the countertop in the ladies, wasn't it? There was one changing facility in the men's toilets as well, which we hadn't. That was Abergavenny, that's right, yeah. The cattle market, the Monmouth Town Council must be congratulated with the contacting Rotary and getting the lovely, because even at this time of the year they look great, and I think it should be encouraged in other areas. The similar thing, perhaps Rotary could be contacted in other towns and to look at that facility there, because it has improved it hugely. But there was a bit of a problem with regard to the sometimes when there's a smell, it's not to do with the cleaning, it's to do with the structure of the toilets. As we found out in Tinton, didn't we, Roger, that it just gets into places and then makes a bad smell. But it's not the cleaning. We have to say that. And then we come to Tinton Abbey. That was not too bad, really, considering. I mean, a lot of these buildings are so old, really, aren't they? I imagine 60s mostly. And they just need a bit of updating. But can I just say once again that if this 17,200 was ring-fenced, David, I'm not sure if that's a possibility, and perhaps the three of us could work with the operations in looking, and Jan, of course.
Yeah, that's certainly the intention of Councillor Webb, because we weren't expecting it. So typical Welsh Government style, we didn't know about it till a couple of weeks ago. But the fact that we weren't expecting it means there isn't any budget provision for it, so which means we should be able to ring fence it to make sure it goes on supporting some of these actions.
Just one other thing, I just want to say how grateful we are that we have actually got toilets in Monmouthshire. A lot of counties have closed their toilets completely, so we've got to say that we haven't closed toilets, we've still got them in the main towns. We're doing our best to maintain them with the staffing and the funding that we've got available, but we're really pleased that we have still got toilets, public toilets in Monmouthshire. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Webb, and I would like to add to that and say that how grateful we were to the brilliant job that the staff do, because we've heard about all the challenges they have, and we were lucky enough to meet some of the staff and thank them, because it really is an incredibly difficult job, and also the job that Jan does in coordinating the cleaning of all the toilets and managing all the staff, because we did feel on the day that the toilets that were managed by Monmouth County Council were gold star cleanliness compared to the ones, for example, Gilwyn, which were, I'm very embarrassed to say, as I'm a community council there, was the worst toilet on the day. What I'd like to do now before we take questions is to just read the response that we've had from the disabled community. We asked them if they'd like to contribute today and what particular issues they have. So I'll read out the letter from Tony Crowhurst to you. I've highlighted the parts relating to emergency alarms. The common faults are that the cord has been tied up, so someone laying on the floor could not reach a toggle, that there's toggles missing. There is no reset button available. And actually this happened because we did go around testing the alarms, and I think I'm right in saying out of the 19 toilets we visited, none of the disabled alarms were working correctly. Yeah. One worked in Caldecott, but we couldn't turn it off, which is really very concerning. The installation is not regularly checked. The cord comes down in the wrong part of the toilet. So those are the main other comments is made is that the minimum room size is further reduced by pipes being encased in floor ducts. The waste bins are not located properly and can block access for wheelchair users. The basin is too far from the WC to be reachable while sitting down. There are incorrect support rail provision, and the support rails do not colour contrast against the wall surfaces. So I think there's some very important points made there by Tony Crowhurst, and we're very grateful to him. And we need to bear these in mind because we need to be thinking about our toilet provision, you know, for the next 10 years and what we as councillors want to see. And I think we were all concerned about the disabled toilets because, in fact, the one in Gilwan we couldn't even access. So I think what I'd like to do now is to ask members for questions, and before we do that, Jan came out with us on the day, and we were very grateful for your for driving us around, Jan. And if you'd like to comment on your feelings really concerning the future provision of these toilets and what needs to happen really from your point of view to further improve the facilities we offer.
I'd like to see some money put in and not repairs done as and when they fall apart, basically. You know, like say things like White Horse Lane, for example. If some money had been spent a little bit every year, perhaps they wouldn't be in such bad condition as they are now at the moment. Years ago, my old boss used to check with the property if there was any money in the budget, and if there was, he would try and take it in turns around the different toilets to give, say, White Horse Lane then a bit of a boost this year and another toilet the following year and so on. But that seemed to have went out the window a long time ago because there's no spare cash around. We do fight fires a little bit in the toilets with problems with the public. We don't have many complaints, which is good. I like to rather think that they're more concerns from the public because they do come on the phone sometimes and they sound a little bit bolshy. But when I say to them then, where years ago I used to sort of apologise and say, I get somebody there quickly to sort it out. Now I sort of explain that I think it's rather disgusting that other human beings leave the toilets in such bad condition for other human beings to clean up. Some of the lowest paid staff on the council have got to go there and clean up behind other human beings. I don't know, when it comes to toilets, I think Monmouthshire needs them because we're a tourist area. I've been through other counties and they haven't got toilet provision, and I think it's a shame because I think we could lose out a lot if the toilets close with tourism. They go to other people, they'll go to other areas, and rather than come to Monmouthshire, they go looking for other sites and places to visit. I think my staff are very good. They've got to put up with a lot. That's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jan, and you've made some very valid points there, which, you know, we all have taken on board, you know, very soundly. So if I could now open this up to members' questions. I know it's a very broad topic. We need to think about, you know, what provision we want to see in future years. We need to be thinking about what we're going to have in 10 years. We need to consider the ageing population, the fact that we want to encourage people to get out and about, and in order to do that, people need to use the toilet. As Jan said, we're a tourist area. Are we really giving people the right impression when they come to our town? Places like Abergavenny, people get off a coach. They're very often elderly people. The first thing they look for is, where's the toilet? So there's a lot to consider here, and we also need to think about how we want to see this £17,500 spent, and whether or not you know, we'd like to see Welsh Government bringing in a scheme again. If we're not able to provide enough toilets ourselves, what incentive are we going to give to private providers to come on board? So, Councillor Webb.
Just one point. Could we know the best practice with regard to the blue light system and also for the disabled alarm system? If we knew the best practice, we'd be able to go from there. Thank you very much, Dave. Thank you.
That's a very important point, Councillor Webb, because I would guess it's actually a legal requirement to provide certain things in toilets, and the disabled cord is one of them. So, you know, the fact that we only found one working is of great concern, and this needs repairing as a matter of urgency. Any other? Councillor Dimmock.
Hello. Just a query. Obviously, Abergavenny, we had a high response rate, so that would say that people are using the ones in Abergavenny, I would take. Caldecott, however, 5%. Obviously, there's a Waitrose there. There's several cafes, restaurant type outlets. Could we look at maybe utilising your department to work more in the north of the county, and maybe these aren't required so much in the south of the county? For instance, you're saying about events. Chepstow has many events around in the castle grounds, isn't it, over the summer? But they always provide portaloos, and obviously there's pubs nearby. So, just thinking about money and how we spend it, clearly Abergavenny is well used or required. Am I right in thinking that, looking at these figures? Tell me if I'm wrong, please.
Perhaps I could pick it up in more general terms. Caldecott, the Jubilee Way toilets, it's been transferred to Caldecott Town Council. Caldecott Town Council pay us to clean those toilets, so they set the level of service which they would like to see. So if we were to go somewhere else, then Caldecott could turn around and say,
Are they actually required in Caldecott with a 5%, or maybe we need to look at actually getting more feedback? Obviously, the dates that it was over, less than a month, and over the Christmas period, like you said, it's not a very good time to be getting the public's response, is it? But there just seems there was a low number of people that responded.
Could I come back there, Chair?
Yeah.
I think some of the issues, sometimes if they're happy with it, they're not going to respond to a questionnaire. It tends to be one of those things. If we had announced we're going to close 5 toilets, there'd be a mass response from the schools, and what do you think here, schools? Fine, unless you propose to shut one, then you suddenly get a massive response rate. So, I mean, Councillor Eason, I'm sure, will comment on Caldecott, but I think probably it's more to do with the fact that they didn't have any complaints. So I think Abergavenny recently has generated a lot of complaints with the police that I referred to. It tends to be very Abergavenny-centric, and I just think because people had concerns, we mentioned White Horse Lane, for example, that inspired them to fill in the questionnaire. I think it's as simple as that, really.
Yeah.
Out of the 18 public toilets, how many of them are actually fit for purpose from a health and safety point of view?
Well, if we wanted to be really harsh because of the situation with the disabled ones, we'd have to say none of them actually ticked all the boxes. The one that was clearly totally unacceptable was the one in Gilwan that isn't managed by Monmouth County Council. Would you agree with that, Councillor Webb? But I think the thing that really concerned us was as Jan referred to, the fact that no investment has been put into the toilets and we've not maintained the buildings adequately. And I mean, there's some real issues. There were bits of wood sticking out. I think that was at Caldecott. There was a huge piece of wood. There were problems with door frames that haven't been painted, that are rotten. Windows that haven't been replaced. There's a lot of structural issues that haven't been addressed because of there being a lack of money. Would you agree with that?
Definitely agree, yeah. Not the cleanliness that was a problem, it was the structures, really, and the building, really, yeah. Thank you, exactly as you said.
Just to add to the health and safety issue, I mean, obviously got Lawrence Dawkins as well, so if we are putting our staff in, I know that Jan's had conversations in the past with Lawrence, clearly if we're putting staff into situations that may be a health and safety risk, then we need to address it from that perspective as well. So I think some of these are certainly maintenance structural issues, aren't they, that, as Roger says, we'll pick up with property, but if we get Lawrence to bang the drum as well, obviously we can share the findings, which is helpful in terms of these are the issues, there are health and safety breaches there. And it's not just our own staff in Jan's side of the world, it's obviously members of the public. We have got a duty of care for people using our facilities, Section 3. And obviously the police as well. So there's a whole range of people in and out of these sites, and we need to ensure we've got minimum health and safety standards. So I think you're right, if you looked at it, it'd probably be, we wouldn't be compliant.
keep forgetting that today, don't I? It's because I'm bunged up. I'm definitely would be interested to hear more on the blue light system. I don't dispute that public toilets aren't needed. You know, you've got people with Crohn's, IBS. You know, my mother, when she was alive, cancer, going to the toilet because of everything, all the drugs in her system. You know, you need somewhere immediately, and you also want a bit of privacy as well. Without going into too much detail. So I'm not disputing the fact that they're needed, but there's nothing worse going into a toilet and it not feeling a very inviting environment.
As far as the blue light goes, I've made inquiries with property services, and Phil Wall was making some inquiries. I just dropped him an email now since he's been in here to chase him up on it. To see if he can come back with some information. They have got them in Chepstow Town Council, because I have asked the question to see if it's just a case of changing the actual strip light or the bulb as such then, regarding, depending on which light it is. But he hasn't come back to me, but I'll keep chasing that up for some more information.
Thank you. On that particular point, I did have a conversation with Councillor Blakeborough, who, you know, used to work with, I think, a charity that was connected with, you know, people who have problems with substance abuse. And she said that there's some latest thinking on this, that actually, you know, for drug addicts, they can get round it by just using a mobile phone, which will provide a light. So, you know, there's lots of things we've got to consider before we jump in, I think, and put these blue lights everywhere. And I think, obviously, we need to have discussions with charities like the one which Councillor Blakeborough worked to find out what latest good practice is. Certainly when I was a councillor in Poole and in Bournemouth, where they had an acute problem, they did have blue lights in all the toilets there. But it is something I think, obviously, we're looking into.
And I think that's the other issue in terms of, obviously, Welsh Government harnessing all this information. I'm sure that's going to come forward, isn't it? It's not just about more provision, it's going to be about the antisocial behaviour aspects. So they'll be coming out with issues as well. There's also a bit of a network going on. So I've been in contact with Caerphilly, for example, in terms of putting the strategy together. So there is that network. So if Pembrokeshire start to use it, we will share that information. So I'm sure that the Ceredigions and others may have obviously gone down this route. But clearly, yeah, you're right. If you've got a mobile phone light, then they'll defeat the object somewhat. So yeah, certainly if the Town Council are looking at it, then great, but also we look at it in terms of other colleagues across Wales as well.
Thank you. Did you want to come back at all, Councillor Dimmock?
No, that's great. Thank you ever so much for your response.
Thank you. Councillor Eason.
Thank you, Chair. I think my point might have been taken care of, but it's to do with this survey. We had a question of toilets in the last council, even the last but one council, and it seems to me that the only area where we've failed to convince community councils to take responsibility for the toilets is Abergavenny. The other three towns, Monmouth, Chepstow, Caldecott, have embraced it, and I'm wondering whether the reflection on the fact that we failed to encourage Abergavenny to take on some responsibility reflects the actual 61%. Yes, you talk about Caldecott, 5%. There are issues there. I know we got the grating on front of the toilets, which creates a rubbish pickup, and that is way to be dealt with by property services. The slab at the back where people tripping over has been repaired. So in actually managing the toilets, there is an interaction between the town councils and property services when things need to be done. This may not be happening in the 61% of people who were surveyed in Abergavenny. I am aware that there is a hiccup on the disabled toilet in Caldecott, where you say you tried the alarm and it wouldn't switch off. I didn't even know it was working. But the problem there is we don't have a telephone line to an emergency telephone line for people who are really stuck in it. So that is something that we've lived with, but really I suppose we need to address.
Thank you, and that's a very important point. Did you want to come back on any of those issues? Roger?
Perhaps reflect on the Abergavenny situation. It has gone on for several years. But Abergavenny Town Council do pay us to clean and maintain the toilets. in the interim, but it has gone on a long time, but I know they are now looking at what they intend to do for the future. There are a couple of others which haven't been transferred. Esk hasn't been transferred. Blessium Street in Monmouth, bless his cotton socks, that hasn't been transferred either. But it's gone on along. The vast majority of the toilets which we have been transferred. So they are actually the responsibility of the town or community council. However, in some instances, in a lot of instances, we provide services on their behalf, cleaning. So Jan has got quite a significant workload cleaning on behalf of those, but not all of them. Some manage their own. Gilwyn manage their own, Chepstow manage their own.
Yeah.
Cowent must manage their own, Goitra must manage their own. They do it themselves, they organise it themselves. So it's we've got a mix of a model. Some of them wouldn't be transferred. We wouldn't be able to transfer Tintern. There's a lease on it, and we've looked at that previously, and that's not feasible. So we went a long way down. When this first started off, we went down the long way down the route of transferring toilets over. Rather than close them, we transferred them. And it did slow down towards the end. But most of these we are being paid to maintain them and clean them.
Just to, if you look at Table 1 and Section 8, that gives you the comprehensive list. So the first 9 are the county council ones, and that gives you a breakdown of costs. So as Rog says, the town council contributions listed there. And then under the double line are those are the ones from the town and community councils owned and managed. And that's why, as I said earlier, the gaps are there because we don't know what their electricity, water charges are. They're not our properties. So that was obviously transferred successfully back in the day. Above the line in Table 1, those are all the ones that are still with us. And as stated, then you can clearly see, so for example, the bus station Abergavenny, town council contributions 13,500. The total cost of that facility is 27.5, so we're paying just over half of that cost. And as Rog says, there's that dialogue now with Abergavenny Town Council currently to revisit that, to try and push them forward in terms of taking that forward.
We in Caldecott found it more beneficial to utilise the service of Monmouthshire Company Council rather than to employ staff ourselves, national insurance contributions, all sorts of things, whereas we used already established staff who were within the under the arms of Monmouthshire County Council for all their facilities and benefits. So it's better to do that than try and take on the employment of people with a small community council. And I think this is the view across most of Monmouthshire. But I do, to talk about toilets in particular, we are a tourist area in Caldecott, particularly the castle. I know that the toilet inside the castle has been well refurbished. You didn't visit that, I don't think, because it was most likely locked up. Yet again, it's only open 7 or 8 hours a day for so many months a year. But the toilet in the country park, I feel is quite, personally, I think it's disgraceful to have it there. I live only 100 yards away from the toilet, and I don't say I can't smell it from my house, but that's not the point. The people will not use that toilet, they prefer to go home. One lady said yesterday, my daughter won't go in there. It's something we've ignored for the last 10 or 12 years. I think action should have been taken 10 or 12 years ago when we started this, and then we wouldn't have the added extra costs which we are now. So as a tourist destination, that toilet is a bad reflection on what we as Monmouthshire are providing. We really need to do something. Your cleaner goes there every day, does the cleaning, locks it up. There is an indication there may be drugs in and around the area. They seem to move around, the drugs, do they? In one patch and another patch. But that toilet within Monmouthshire is no better than the one on Mitchell Troy on the motorway.
I don't think I've ever had a report of any drugs there or any of my gentlemen picking up any drugs, but the outside of the building is rather tatty. The access to the disabled is quite poor. They've got this big lump of a wooden door that is basically hanging off.
You can't do it.
Well, I say hanging off, the hinge looks a bit dodgy on it, and there's a big lump of metal. You've got to open the one door, and then you've got to open another door, which is like a fridge door in the inside. Whether any disabled people actually know it's there and even use it, I don't know. It looked quite clean inside, but the access to it is horrendous. But with the electric point and the wood is so tatty around the outside, it does need looking at. Inside, I don't feel it's too bad personally. It's quite roomy, it's quite light because we've got a lot of natural
Lot of
light
light, I
coming
agree.
in. It's not tiled. It's like a rough rendering in there, painted rendering. But overall, I don't think it's too bad. But the outside lets it down badly.
I have been in the ladies' toilet, but I know the gents' toilet is a stainless steel trough, and youngsters can't get to that trough. They've got to go into the other toilet, and I do believe that we need to do something for those toilets. It is a bad reflection, and it costs money, I know, but it's under Countryside, this I believe, or Leisure. I'm not sure who was under particularly, but there must be some expenditure done to that toilet. The other problem I know that we got in that system is that it's very, very low. The nearest place for the sewerage is very, very low across the way, and we do get occasions when, if it's a very busy day, everything blocks up and the drains block up. So in terms of putting a toilet there or renewing a toilet, maybe we should look at a different position. I'm not sure, but that is another problem. The underground pipes are very, very old, and the sewerage station is just across the way, 2 or 300 yards away, pretty low, so it doesn't have much flow. So that is another matter on event days where it gets busy, but we do get portaloos there which remove the problem to a certain extent.
Thank you, Councillor Easton. Can you turn your... Did anybody want to make any further comments on the points made there? Councillor Roden.
Thank you, Chair. I'm quite interested in toilet numbers, actually. David, you advise festivals on the number of toilets that they require. So presumably there's a visitor number, toilet logic. And if this was applied to the towns of Monmouth, would we be in excess or below the kind of recommendations? Just curious. Thank you.
Yeah, events are very easy, isn't it? So if you've got a little mix 15,000, there's a guidance that's particularly specific, tells you how many male and female toilet provision go in. The difficulty with towns is the footfall varies so much. And I spoke to Caerphilly about this. So Tuesdays are busy because it's market day. So yesterday's, particularly in fact, I was in Abergavenny, it's quite busy. You go on a Wednesday at 10 o'clock, it's going to plunge, isn't it? And I think I try to make reference to it. It's about flexibility. So to answer your question, I don't think there's any hard and fast rule. There are recommendations, but as previously commented on, a lot of authorities don't provide any public facilities now. But I think some of the recommendations will refer to within 500 yards of a toilet facility. But it's got to depend on footfall, isn't it, logically? So Gilburn's going to be very different to, Cardiff city centre. I did ask tourism for footfall numbers, but I think it is with that caveat, really, that it fluctuates so hugely. It's not a, Paddington Station will have X number of toilets because the flow is so huge in terms of footfall. Some of these that we've talked about are infrequently used, particularly in villages. I don't know what the footfall is in Goitra, for example. So I think, anecdotally, I think we're doing pretty well, and I think that's been commented on, isn't it? I think Councillor Webb mentioned it. That we have got them, and we've got them in some numbers, and I think some authorities, it's quite startling. They either haven't got any, or they've got some, they haven't got any running water. I mean, I think some are very primitive. But I think that will come through from the Welsh Government harnessing the information of the 25, if you include the national parks as well. So you'd expect them to come up with some sort of recommendations as to what the numbers typically would look like as a recommendation, because they will go back to the issue that, and well, certainly local government would, there's no legal requirement to provide public toilets per se. And I think that's a bit of a dilemma. So when you talk about disabled facilities, great, and we want to have them a suitable standard. For some authorities, the costs are going to be quite extortionate, so you're better off closing it, which I think is a worse solution than trying to make better a fairly basic provision. And I think your survey identified that, isn't it? Clean but basic. They're not manned. Is that the best, as opposed to perhaps potentially trying to up the ante on? So I'm not saying the basics, but in terms of more deluxe facilities, that would be to the detriment of the numbers, if you're with me. If you want to spend X amount of money on less, I think the better solution potentially would be to make sure we got them. They may be basic, but they are there, and they are in the areas that we need them. But footfall's a bit of a difficult one, and Caerphilly sort of took it out of their strategy, in fact, because it didn't really tell them anything, didn't add anything to the equation.
Thank you. In terms of footfall, I guess that you need to have in mind about 90% of the numbers that you're likely to achieve in a town most of the time, in order to calculate toilet provision if you use a formula. But I understand that certain places are not using it. I'm just thinking in terms of, we want tourists, we need to provide adequate facilities, and if there's a number in mind and we know it, then we can say whether we're achieving the target, overachieving or underachieving. I like numbers, you can work with those. That's just a thought anyway. Yeah. And secondly, the questionnaire, you took the word centric right out of my mouth, Abergavenny centric. Would it be possible to obtain the views of the Monmouth residents that completed the survey? I'd be very interested to know what people thought of our own, if possible. Thank you.
We are working on a site. I literally spoke to Rhiannon Cooks to give me some help, because I'm not the most technically savvy, as colleagues will comment on. But we are setting up a site that will bring all the toilet survey information together, the strategy, the survey itself, plus the toilet mapping exercise I referred to. So we are working on that as we speak. So certainly there'll be an opportunity there. We don't want to revisit this survey because I'll talk about the tight timescale we got. There is a legal requirement to get it done. However, I think that if people in Monmouth, for example, want another opportunity to comment, be it Chamber of Commerce, etc., then there's a 10-week window in terms of the consultation. I'm just looking in terms of the survey on the website, and that does break it down. So all I did in the strategy was obviously highlight the key issues. There's 27 pages of feedback, which Rhiannon kindly put together, and I'm pretty sure within that there is a Monmouth comment. So I'm just scrolling down now. So certainly Abergavenny comes out, as you say, because 61% of them all came from Abergavenny. Monmouth, we only had one comment specifically on Monmouth, only used the toilets in Waitrose as find the public toilets unacceptable. But in terms of, so we can't revisit the public survey because of timescales, but certainly there's an opportunity. And speaking to colleagues earlier, I'll send a personal email to some of those town councils and some of the key groups through Rhiannon in terms of the Public Service Board, for example, just to make sure we capture anything that's missed, because as Councillor Dimmock said, I mean, Christmas isn't a great time. So I think there's an opportunity there in terms of the consultation to say, look, there it is. We'll ask them some key questions. If you've got any further comments, we'd welcome them. So hopefully that'd capture, so it's not so Abergavenny-centric then. Okay.
Just one more comment, if I may, Chair. Would there be any benefit in a risk register approach to the toilets, or a star rating scheme for public conveniences? Just to give us some idea of where we should be targeting our resources, perhaps. Thanks.
Certainly, I think Welsh Government are keen on ideas, and if you've got a spare half a day, have a look at the guidance. Not the most riveting read, but they are looking at trying to pick up some of that best practice. But certainly, they are keen, as a tourism destination, visit Wales, and a lot of investment clearly in tourism within Wales, to look at opportunities to see how we actually record that and share that with the wider population. So certainly, I mean, if we are got ideas, I mean, the star rating scheme, as you know, because I've reported on food hygiene, has been hugely successful. It's very readily understandable by the members of the public. So you could say, why not? Like I said, I think Welsh Government now are now taking the time. Everything's got to be in with them by the end of May. By the end of the year, expect Welsh Government to come up with certain recommendations, be it numbers, etc., in terms of these sort of, per 10,000 people, we generally expect X number, but also how do we actually grade them? So I think that's a valid point, and we can certainly feed that back through the process.
I don't need take members back to the same place. I think it's something you need to encourage the town and community councils to take on board, because the majority of them are managed by them.
Absolutely, and I think in terms of, and I think it's come through this, isn't it? I think some of the observations from the members was there hasn't been too much investment potentially in 10 years, and how do we check on that? So Roger's right in terms of the service providers, but we have got a role in terms of strategy, in terms of ensuring monitoring and making sure that's a requirement on us. So even though provided by Caldecott Town Council, for example, there is a role for us to ensure that standard is adequate. So it is working with them, certainly. Yeah.
If I may, Madam Chairman, I think it's a case of having to work with them. It's a point Dave made. Perhaps I was a little blunt about it. But it is, if we're going to rate that toilet provided by that town or community council, then we should be working with them to let them know that this is the strategy which we're adopting and the implications for them.
Chair, if I may, just one point. It wouldn't necessarily have to be a stars on doors type of response. It could always be an internal report provided to councils to let them know where they stand. You don't have to go around sticking the stickers on the doors. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Roden. Some excellent points made there. Councillor Webb.
Just going on to what Councillor Oden has just said, there were any other councils do this, a similar system with rating? I don't know. It might be interesting to know how they do it, if they do it at all, but probably they don't.
Not that I'm aware of.
The other thing is, going on from Councillor Eason's point, I mean, is it possible to do, I know outside this strategy, but to do a cost analysis on that toilet in Caldecott, please, because you've got the wonderful castle, you've got a wonderful entrance with the church and everything else around it, and then you've got these toilets. I mean, it might be worthwhile doing, mightn't it, to see how much it costs to run. And there was one other point which I can't remember what it was now. But anyway, yeah, I'll think of it later.
Yeah.
I think the toilets at Caldecott Countryside Park is probably a specific matter we need to raise. I was chatting with Jan earlier about where the budgets lie, where the responsibilities lie. And I think that's something we need to clarify really and come back, well, put in place some arrangements to improve that facility and clarify who's managing what. I am aware of the issue around the charging point, for example, and it's unfortunate that it is it is where it is. But that type of thing needs resolving and putting right. So I think, given the comments from members, we'll pick it up with a couple of other officers and see what should be done with it.
Councillor Eason, did you? Okay. Can I just ask, I mean, I'm particularly concerned about the provision in my ward. We have no toilets at all. We lost the toilets in Clydach that used to be by the picnic site in the caravan park. And, you know, we're a Cwm Clydach Nature Reserve. We've got the ironworks. There's nowhere for anybody to go to the toilet apart from the pubs, which aren't open all the time. We've got two small pubs, but they're, you know, not as I say, open all the time. And I would like to know how much work we do with Cadw and Brecon Beacons National Park. Presumably they'll be going through this same exercise, looking at their toilet provision. And I think if we're serious about being a tourist destination, we've got spent all these millions and millions of pounds on a new road. And yet, you know, we've got signposted off that road. Presumably we'll have brown signs saying this is where the ironworks is, and there's not one toilet in the area. So, you know, I think that we need to really think seriously about our future provision and look at where we want to develop tourism. And it shouldn't just fall on the county council. You know, what about Cadw and Brecon Beacons Parks? What are they doing to encourage tourism in the area? So, you know, do we have conversations with these other you know, partners to address this issue?
Absolutely agree with you, Chair. Certainly, I've been in contact with Brecon because they've stuck a 20p facility in the middle of town. They thought it was the town council, so they were going to come back to me on that. But absolutely, I mean, we know about the Heads of the Valleys Road, isn't it? I mean, it's cost hundreds of millions of pounds and taken up a massive amount of officer time. And you think in the scheme of things, and I think that's a Welsh Government issue, isn't it, in terms of that particular, if we're going to encourage people to get off the road and spend money. That's all tourism, regeneration question, isn't it? But I think you're right, we need to link it into that. And I've made some notes. There's certainly feedback for Welsh Government there, be it some sort of standard system, something about linking to others. The trunk roads, clearly what we got between Swansea and West Midlands. I know we got the Gibraltar tunnels, haven't we? Mitchell-Troy. You know, I think they need to be engaged as well. I mean, I've had great success in the past with a trunk road agency. But you can't swing off at Llanfoist to McDonald's because it won't take 44-ton trucks, clearly. So where do they go? So it isn't just the right chair. It's not certainly not just an issue for the local authority. And Roger keeps saying, the providers are very often typically the town and community councils. So I think that's the purpose of the strategy, really, was to emphasise that point. It's not a county council provision service, but it is for us to ensure those standards are adequate. I think perhaps I answered some of the questions. It's for us to oversee it. There is a requirement now to look at it, so I think we need to obviously work with property colleagues, etc. 17,000 isn't a lot, but certainly I suggest perhaps a few officers, a couple of officers and members get together as to where that would be best spent. I've spoken to my finance manager to say it's coming our way. And I think to answer your question, Councillor Webb, we will ring fence that to make sure there's some improvement this year. The money should be forthcoming fairly soon. Doesn't answer all the questions, but back to the partnership bit, absolutely, it's not just about MCC. What are you doing about it? It's about what do we do in the wider context of national parks, Sutra and others. Agreed.
Thank you. And I think as part of our strategy, if we actually identify how much it's going to cost to get all these toilets back up to speed, you know, I find it incredible. I've got a colleague who's a councillor in Caerleon, which has got a Roman amphitheatre and all the thousands of people that go there, and they've closed all the public toilets. So we are very lucky here that we've got ours, but I think you're absolutely right. Welsh Government really need to have a better strategy as to how they're going to manage this, because if we want people to come and spend money in our towns, and we've got reduced footfall in our towns, and I think that, you know, local shops and businesses and other tourist attractions will be looking to us to maintain good facilities, because it's going to be another thing that's going to ensure that we keep our towns and high streets vibrant. Councillor Webb.
Can I second what you've suggested about the toilet, the infrastructure on the new 465 route? I mean, it's so important that we get in now, really, and make sure that we've got these facilities there. I'm sure there must be a few £1,000s that can be found from this project, biggest in Europe. I mean, surely, and at this stage, we need to get in there and make sure we've got plenty of signing and plenty of facilities for the important historic thing in your area, Chairman. And the other thing is, can we please be involved with any improvements? I mean, the colours really as well. I mean, they're all green doors. I mean, just things that sort of female-y, sort of, perhaps I shouldn't say that, suggestions with colouring, and Jan be involved with different things. I mean, the doors are green, a horrible green. Can't we have a nice, you know, modern colour, which would make a huge difference to the access to the toilets, and particularly the one in Caldecott Castle and other. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you.
Jan, would you like to come back on that? Because, I mean, you're obviously going into these toilets every day and you know exactly what's going on and you know what would work best. And I think, do you have any strong feelings about how we could improve the decor and the signage and there was one particular toilet, I think it was a Gilwan one, where there wasn't even a sign, so you didn't even know which was the ladies and which was the gents.
I think that the signing is particularly bad on the toilets in general, because even if there were signs, they were up high. Say like White Horse Lane, they had quite a few signs, but they were all over the place. Yeah. With arrows pointing around the corner, the signage was very good. At one time, we did have a post in Tinton that had been there for years, but there was no sign actually pointing which direction the toilets were. There wasn't a sign, full stop, but the post was put there many years ago, apparently. I think signing is a big thing. We need it. I think there may be legal requirements when it comes to signing, because property a good few years ago went round and updated all the signs, and there was braille on the signs and so on. So perhaps property needs to go and look at that side of it again. Regards decorating, the colours, a lot of the toilets that we looked at, we commented how nice the green and the cream was, which were done years ago. I don't think it's bad personally, with the tiles now, I mean, with the tiles at the bottom, with the dark green and the cream were at the top. Now I think in general they stand the test of time quite well. The doors, yes, then they tend to be green because it's council colours, that's why it was done. Perhaps we could go with cream on the doors, which we have in White Horse Lane, funny enough, which did make the toilet look lighter and brighter in there. We have got other colours in other areas, like in Cattle Market in Monmouth, with reds and greys and pinks. But I think the most sensible is the green and the cream, but perhaps the doors, if they were cream, would improve it, to be honest. But having the dark green at the bottom and the cream at the top, I think that's sensible, because when it comes to graffiti and things like that, there's less chance of it showing up, to be honest. The outside doors are green, I suppose, because again, it's Monmouthshire colours. It always tended to be Monmouthshire colours.
Thank you, Jan. So I think that, would you mind turning your... Thanks. I think that, as Jan says, the tiles have stood the test of time, but everything needs a bit of a facelift, really, and a bit of a smarten up, doesn't it? And, you know, we could be making more of it. The other thing is, just briefly getting back to the Clydach toilets, you know, we've got a village hall in Clydach, which has got toilets which are outside, including, I think, a disabled toilet, which we could have, you know, worked with that village hall committee and got a toilet provision that was available and open to the public. And I think, you know, we need to work harder at pursuing these things, because I still feel that there's capacity out there that we're not making the most of. Are there any other questions from any members? So I think just to wrap everything up, did you want to... Councillor Dimmock.
I've got my thank you, Tony. My health and safety hat on today. Jan, when you and your team go out, do you go on your own? Are your team lone workers, or are they paired up? Just because of the issues that you're facing in Abergavenny with drug use and...
It's part and parcel of the everyday. You know, it's just another day in the life of a toilet cleaner and myself, to be honest. But when we had the meeting, Dave and I, with the Chris Butt, he was saying that his officers won't go in the gentlemen's. We all went in, ladies, didn't we, the other day? Yes, there was 4 of us, but I go in the men's, you know, and it's just part and parcel of every day, part of the job.
That's worrying, is all I'll say.
Councillor Easton.
Just one brief request. The few comments you picked up about Jubilee Way car park in Caldecott, could you pass that information on to the clerk of the council and they can deal with those matters then?
We'll move on to the recommendation shortly, Chair, but I think in terms of that consultation, I think the best thing is I personalise a message to those community councils and town councils that provide toilets, and then raise the sort of issues, the specifics then, isn't it? This is the strategy, you've got a 10-week consultation. You know, Councillor Roden's point, if Monmouth have got further comments, there's an opportunity. So please comment on the draft strategy, but also there's some specific issues regarding your, if you are the provider, we can encapsulate that in that email. Yeah, so yes. Yeah.
As you're here as licensing, will this become before the licensing committee next week for ratification? Or at any stage?
No, I think I can talk through it. I don't know if you want to do it now, Chair, just in terms of the timetable I've got to work to.
Right, okay.
So basically, obviously, I'll incorporate the comments from today. We've now got the condition survey back, thankfully for the members that went out last week with Jan. So I'll give myself till next week to incorporate all those issues into the report, and obviously the comments are made today, so I can refer to suggested best practice through the strategy. We start the consultation then, all being well, on the 22nd of February. That needs to run for 10 weeks, so that will run until the 3rd of May. By the 10th of May, I will include the comments of that public consultation process. By the 15th of May, I then need to do the internal consultation within the local authority. So that's 2 weeks through chief officers, etc. So that internal consultation will end on the 29th of May. That then will be ready for decision at Cabinet on the 5th of June.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, all right, yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So I think we can wrap up this meeting now, and I think we've had some very important points made. Just as a recap, I think the infrastructure was one of the things that we're very concerned about, the state of the toilets, the fact that there hasn't been much investment in the buildings, and that we're concerned that they meet legal requirements and that they're safe, because we've had comments about things like the doors not being safe. So that all needs to be looked at, and an audit needs to be done of those buildings so we know exactly what needs to be spent in future. We're very grateful to our excellent employees, and that's been discussed numerous times here, the brilliant job that our employees do in very difficult circumstances. So we want to make a note of that today. And we also feel that we need to, looking towards the future, when we're going to have an ageing population, and we need to work more closely with other agencies to make sure that we've really got the best offer so that we can be a really attractive tourist destination. And I think the idea of grading toilets is fantastic. You know, everybody now goes on TripAdvisor and different apps, question of time before there's a toilet one, and people are so used to using their phones, so I'm sure that'll come in the future. So I just want to draw members' notice to the recommendations, 2.1, that we consider and comment on the draft local toilet strategy, that the findings of the member visit be added prior to the draft strategy going to public consultation, and that after public consultation the strategy goes to Cabinet for adoption. Are you all happy with those recommendations? Can I have a show of hands? Thank you very much. Can I thank members for their contributions, for officers, and especially Jan for coming along today, who's absolutely key in this piece of work. So thank you very much, Jan, for coming and your very valuable contribution. And we look forward to the next public consultation. I have to say, if there's any feedback I'd like to give, I was one of the 132 people that filled that survey in. I thought it was a terrible survey. It was very, very long. It was from Welsh Government. It wasn't our own survey, and it should have been much shorter and snappier than it was. And I think, some people would have actually given up because some of the questions weren't relevant. So that would be my comment back on that. But thank you all very much indeed. Can we just have the date of our next meeting, which is our Stronger Communities Normal Select Committee?
Just bear with me a second.
Just wait to...
Weeks, isn't it?
got it in my diary. But it's actually on the Thursday, the 21st of March. Is that correct?
Also, yeah.
At 10 o'clock. So
10 a.m.
look forward to seeing you at 9:30 for the pre-meeting. Thank you all very much. The meeting is now closed.